All right, thanks for tuning in to OFN College Football Weekly for this Thursday. It is the 19th of December, 2019, as we are now, less than a week away from Christmas. Matter of fact, Mitch, we're going to be on the air on Christmas Eve for part 2 of our 4-part series of bowl season, including, of course, the playoffs. So we've got a lot to talk about, including 10 bowl games this week.
Yep, I'll be tucked away at the in-laws, so I'll have no problem, sneaking out.
Yeah, next week's the week where you're going to go, Greg,
Yeah.
if you want to do 4 hours, I'm okay with that.
Exactly. Usually I'm all cramped for time, but I'll have all day to talk college football.
All right, sounds good. Let's get caught up, first of all, on the coaching changes. We talked about several of these changes last week. Matter of fact, I think we talked about some of the possibilities on all of these, and I think we hit all of them pretty well on the mark, starting with a couple of Mountain West Conference moves. Danny Gonzalez goes from Arizona State to his alma mater, New Mexico, and he did a really good job as a coordinator under Rocky Long. Of course, he's got the Rocky Long, New Mexico, San Diego State connection, took the job with Herm Edwards, and now all of a sudden, this is interesting because now Herm Edwards, who we'll be talking about next week, because I think next week, we don't have him this week, he's got some problems because he's got both coordinators gone, and he's got his star wide receiver saying, "Yeah, I'm done. I'm going to the NFL." So that's the kind of stuff that you gotta pay attention to with bowl season.
Yeah, he fired some coaches and then probably didn't anticipate losing Gonzalez. I like the Gonzalez hire. I typically think sometimes hiring one of your own, like a guy who went to that school, is a little overrated. But I think a school like New Mexico, which has its disadvantages, it's a difficult job, the money's not great, all that. Sometimes you need someone who has a real passion for the school. Sort of like Mike New at Ball State, a guy that it means just every coach wants to win wherever they are, but it means just a little bit more when it's at your alma mater. And I think that could be a boost here to New Mexico.
Absolutely. I agree. I think it is a very good hire for them. And then you move on to Fresno State. It was a no-brainer that DeBoer got the job there. He was very successful for 2 years under Tedford. And then 1 year at Indiana, very instrumental in the success of the Hoosiers football program this year, one of the best years that they've had since we've been alive, and that's not overstating it. And he did it with 2 quarterbacks. So this is a real good hire for Fresno State as well.
Yeah, these ones weren't rocket science. We predicted them, and those were the names that were floating out there. Gonzalez and DeBoer, obviously, at Indiana. Doing that great job at Indiana. It made so much sense to bring him back to Fresno.
And then if we move on to the East, Jeff Hafley, the defensive coordinator at Ohio State, gets the job. That was a no-brainer as well because the AD's got the Ohio State connections, and Hafley was one of the hot coordinators out on the market. And I believe now Gonzalez, I think, as I mentioned before, I think Gonzalez is gone now from Arizona State. I believe DeBoer wants to coach in the bowl game, so that's not set in stone yet. And I've got to believe Hafley, I got to believe he's coaching in the playoffs, even though Lane Kiffin left. But, Hafley is going to coach the game, right?
Yeah, he at his press conference, he said, I'd love to stay here and devote all my energy to Boston College, but I have a national championship to go win.
Okay. And you're okay with that?
Yeah, I think so. I think BC has to, if I hire a coach whose team's not in the playoff, I want them immediately. But if he's in the playoff, that's too much to ask for him to leave the team.
If I would have hired him 2 weeks ago, I'd want him there. But you're basically hiring him a day or two before the recruiting deadline. It's over. You might as well then I agree. Forget it. Do what you got to do. Okay, App State, the 2 interim labels off very quickly. Sean Clark, both offensive line guys, and Ryan Silverfield from Memphis. So they're in-house guys, but these are unknown commodities, especially in Memphis after a huge season and everything that Norville did there. So risky, but we'll see if it works out.
Yeah, looking for continuity there. And I've got a good friend from college who lives in Memphis, and he tweeted out, it wasn't trying to be critical. He said, Ryan Silverfield seems like the right guy at the right time, but just keep in mind he's probably the least qualified coach that Memphis has ever hired in football. he's a guy that would never have gotten the job unless he was on the staff.
Okay.
He'd not been a coordinator, not been a head coach, so that'll be interesting to watch.
But I guess the good thing is that, and maybe for both programs, because App State, they'll be in their second straight bowl without their head coach. So, and the guy Clark, I mean, the program is everything to him. So
Yes.
you get the belief that that's a guy that's going to probably be there for a while, and the same thing for Silverfield. So
yeah, I think so too. But it's funny, Eli Drinkowitz goes from 750,000 to 4 million. So Sean Clark can love his alma mater, but if he puts together 2 good seasons, he's out of there.
Yeah, even one, right? Thanks, but I got to pay the bills. Okay,
Yep.
So let's get into the bowl games. And by the way, it's already happening with the players that are not only declaring, but are saying, I'm not going to go and risk myself in just a bowl game. And I look, this is going to be one of the factors, I believe, when they do start talking about expanding the playoffs, because there are some people who are, they're criticizing that now because of that, the players look at bowl games a different way, and they don't get to the playoffs, and bowl games don't mean anything to them anymore. And nobody is going to get rid of the bowl games. Let's just whenever they come up with an 8 or 16 team, however long that takes, they're never going to get rid of the bowl system, nor should they ever get rid of the bowl system. But it is something that is just going to get the list is probably going to grow more every year, where players are just going to say, you know what, I'm just not going to risk it unless they're in the playoffs.
Yeah, totally agree. And I don't fault the guys. I don't love it. But the bowl games, they kind of are what they are. They're still great, rewards for the teams. And if you did expand the playoffs, that's 16 teams. It's 8 teams playing in bowl games. And a lot of the teams that don't make the playoffs, there'll be that group that kind of are bummed that they didn't make the playoff and maybe not happy to be in their bowl games. But there'll still be a vast majority of the Charlottes and the Buffaloes and the Kent States and Central Michigans that are Indianas that are thrilled to be where they are.
That's right. And we'll start with 2 teams that are thrilled to be in the Bahamas Bowl, Charlotte and Buffalo. Charlotte, because it's the first time they've ever been in a bowl. They've only been in existence for less than 10 years, like 7 years or something like that. Will Healy, we've talked about him a few times this year. He is definitely a coach that if Charlotte is a competitive Conference USA championship team next year, he won't be with Charlotte in 2021. I think we can agree to that. He's only 33 years old, so he did a tremendous job at Austin Peay, doing a great job already at Charlotte. Buffalo, meanwhile, they've never won a bowl game. First time they've ever been in consecutive bowls. It is time for Lance Leopold and Buffalo to get one of these things done, because they should have won the MAC championship last year, and that got away from them. The bowl game got away from them. They got to close the deal here.
Yeah, no, I agree. A little bit of pressure on them. They had a nice season, heavy losses. We talked about the season, about their losses. Closed the season with 2 nice wins. I like Buffalo to win the game. The spread's 6.5. I like Charlotte to cover. I don't think there's a motivation issue in this game at all. Like you mentioned, both teams happy to be there.
Right.
I think Charlotte's both teams have a lot of momentum. So I think Buffalo's the better team. I think they've got the better roster.
Yes.
But just I think Charlotte can cover the spread.
Yeah, and when that quarterback Van Treese, when we've talked about him, as soon as and it only happened because of injury, but as soon as he got the opportunity to play, Buffalo, their offense really, and the whole team just took off. But Jarrett Patterson, this is going to be one of those MAC players that's going to have himself a fantastic NFL career. This is the real deal, this kid.
Yeah, I just looked up his numbers. I didn't realize how productive he'd been. Of course, you're talking about the running back for Buffalo, 1,600 yards, 5.8 yards per attempt, and 17 touchdowns.
And also Benny LeMay is a solid running back as well for Charlotte. So 2 excellent running backs. And I must say this because we're talking about the MAC to kick things off here. This is one of the trends that when you're talking about conference records and bowl games, this is the biggest one. It's been the biggest one now for a couple of years. It'll continue this way unless they start winning bowl games. But the MAC right now is on a 2-15 run the last 3 years in bowls.
Straight up, right?
Straight up. And
That is
and you know who's got the 2
not
wins?
good.
Ohio.
Ohio?
Yes. Crazy, huh? Just lost 3 years, but that's just crazy.
That's not. I mean, you can debate the value of bowl games and bowl records by conference, but you should think that all MAC teams are motivated to be in bowl games, because that's when you go to a MAC school, you're not going to play in a you're not going to play in the playoff. You're really not. You've got no chance almost of being in the New Year's Six bowl. So you should be happy to be wherever you're at, and they're clearly not playing well.
Yeah, there's just whatever it is. That's just telling you that the competition level. You would think this one shouldn't be as a big deal, though, because Buffalo is still – I think we both believe Buffalo is one of the better teams in the MAC, and Charlotte just barely got in from one of the most disappointing conferences. Conference USA might be the worst conference in college football this year, so this is going to be a good indication if that's true or not.
Yeah, no, I agree. The bottom conference USA really brings it down too. So yeah, it's an interesting barometer game for 2 leagues. You're not going to make sweeping generalizations based on who wins, but I'm intrigued by this one. I'll be sure to get this one on the TV in the office tomorrow.
All right, now let's also talk about the Friday night game tomorrow, and that is Kent State and Utah State in the Frisco Bowl. And Kent State, it's all about quarterback Dustin Crum. Because without Dustin Crum, not sure exactly where this Kent State football team would be. Utah State, meanwhile, Jordan Love had himself a disappointing season. We knew the talent level wasn't there compared to the year prior. So the record-wise, this shouldn't be a surprise that Utah State didn't really get to where they wanted to go. There's a lot of guys graduated that were top players from the year prior. But still, disappointing year, and now we're hearing about, and this comes around every bowl season, where players get suspended, even though apparently Love is not going to be suspended. But Love and their top running back, Gerald Bright, both were arrested for marijuana possession. We're hearing they're going to play, though.
Yeah, I mean, Jordan Love, that was the word yesterday that he's going to play. And I like Utah State to cover. I think it's 6.5 spread.
I agree.
Great story, Kent State. I like the Sean Lewis hire off of the Dino Babers staff when they made it, and he's got him in his second year in a bowl game. Great story there, but they got a thin roster. Utah State coming from a better league. Just think they're the superior team, and this is one of the ones I like the most that we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, I agree. You want to root for teams like Kent State, but you got to put the picks in the brain and not in the heart. And the fact is, Utah State, Mountain West Conference against the MAC, and I would think in Jordan Love's last game, look, he doesn't have to play the game. So the fact he's playing the game tells you that you would be pretty confident that he's going to try and do his best. So, which is probably not good for Kent State. Okay, let's get to Saturday games, and we'll start with the first one, the New Mexico Bowl. And San Diego State's a 3.5 point favorite against Central Michigan. Jim McElwain, great job this year, but very disappointing losing in the championship game. And what made Miami successful this season was their defense. Now, Central Michigan's got to step up and take on San Diego State's defense. It's only 3.5 points, and I get it because San Diego State's offense is pretty pathetic, but their defense is so good that I'm pretty confident they'll be able to cover that spread.
Yeah, I like San Diego State as well to win and cover. San Diego State has not given up more than 17 points since October 2nd. Here's a crazy: last 4 games, neither team in a San Diego State game has scored more than 17 points. It's 17-13, 17-7, 14-11, and 13-3. I've said the same thing for 3 straight games. I just think one of these teams is far more talented than the other team, and I think San Diego State's roster, the line of scrimmage, should have its way with Central Michigan.
And Central Michigan, even though McElwain hasn't been with the team prior to this year, they've lost 4 straight bowls, including the last 2 by a 92-24 margin. Rocky Long, don't forget, his team wants some comeback after losing 27-0 last year in their bowl game. So.
Yep, a bit of a homecoming. He, had a great run there as the New Mexico head coach,
right.
so he'll be playing at the former home stadium.
That's right. All right, let's go to the Cure Bowl. And this is Liberty and Georgia Southern. Georgia Southern is about a 4-point favorite in this one. And you got Hugh Freeze, who got his extension. Look, we know about Liberty, talent-wise, independent, their weak schedule this year. Their only win against bowl teams this year was their win over Buffalo. All their other wins were against, cupcakes. Meanwhile, Georgia Southern, they did have a pretty tough schedule. They did beat Appalachian State on the road, the only team to do that. So I feel pretty good about Georgia Southern being able to take down Liberty. The only trepidation I would have is Hugh Freeze is the best coach on the football field.
Yeah, I agree. I like with everything you said there. Basically, I just think Georgia Southern's more battle tested. That win over App State's, a really good win. It was at App State, and you give Liberty credit; they did a nice job there. But they cobbled together a 7-5 record without really any good wins. Buffalo's a solid win, but just think that Georgia Southern's the better team.
Okay, let's go to Saturday afternoon, Boca Raton Bowl. And Lane Kiffin will not coach the game. Glenn Spencer, the defensive coordinator, will be the interim. And, of course, Taggart will take over next year. SMU's a 3-point favorite. The game, of course, being on FAU's home field. FAU won the Boca Raton Bowl. And actually, let's see. What did they win? 50-3, I think it was that score, in 2017 over Akron.
Akron,
so
yes.
They have a history here of being able to dominate on their whole turf at a bowl game. But Akron is not SMU. SMU is not Akron. I think SMU is going to win this. This could be my favorite one of the week. I know SMU didn't play as well at the end of the season, the beginning of the season, but I just think with Kiffin gone, that's a huge loss. SMU is just a much more talented football team. FAU took on UCF from the AAC on their home turf and got beat up 48-14. I think SMU is going to cruise in this one.
Agree again. And this is 4 games in a row that I feel pretty good about, which is kind of dangerous.
Trouble.
I just think that, usually in bowl games, they're almost impossible to pick, sometimes straight up, let alone against the spread. But this is 4 straight spread picks that I really feel good about. And just SMU is just a better team.
Yeah, and by the way, it's not just offensively. I mean, they set program records for sacks and tackles for loss. They were second in the nation with 50 sacks this year. So that just shows you the talent that SMU has. And it's also Sonny Dykes going up against Glenn Spencer. So
yeah, interesting.
Yeah, I mean, that's keep an eye, though, on Harrison Bryant, the FAU tight end, who could be a very interesting guy to keep an eye on for the NFL draft this year, the John Mackey winner. Okay, let's go to the Camellia Bowl. This is FIU against Arkansas State. Quarterback Lane Hatcher, the Sun Belt Freshman of the Year, throwing passes to the Sun Belt Player of the Year, Omar Bayless. And Arkansas State, again, a very short favorite in this one. Here's an interesting note. In the Camellia Bowl, they've had 5 bowl games. All 5 have been decided by 5 points or less. That doesn't help us out much, though, because it's only a 2.5-point spread.
Yeah, good little information there. So I am changing my tune after feeling good about 5 games. I don't feel as good about this one. Arkansas State is my pick. I like the firepower that they played with, especially with the young quarterback there. But again, don't feel great about this. My pick was 28-24, Arkansas, covering the spread barely.
Yeah, I'm a little bit worried about the fact that even though this is their 9th consecutive trip to a bowl game, which is real shocking, but Arkansas State's a premier Sun Belt program, they're just 1-4 straight up and against the spread in their last 5 bowls. They are just 2-12 straight up and against the spread versus bowl teams the last 3 years. But look, FIU is barely like a bowl team. It hasn't been a great year for the Conference USA, as we said. So right. I agree with you. I'm leaning a little bit towards FIU, but yeah, this is one of those games I've just watch.
You take out the win over Miami, which is part of their season, so it counts. Their wins are over New Hampshire, UMass, Charlotte, UTEP, and Old Dominion. Charlotte's obviously in a bowl team. The other 4 teams stink. Mm-hmm. So. Yep. Not a great FIU team. One of the more disappointing teams, actually. We picked them in our preseason magazine to win the Conference USA East.
Okay. Let's now turn our attention to Saturday night games. Boise State, Washington. As far as name recognition, between now and our show next week, this is the biggest game. You've got Boise State, who they're 4-0 in the Las Vegas Bowl since 2010. They're going to go up against a Washington team that is a 3-point favorite, and they're playing for Chris Peterson in his last game on the sidelines. So that should be interesting. Chris Peterson, the former Boise State head coach, actually went to Boise in 2015, lost that game as an 11-point dog, lost the game by just 3 points. Washington hasn't won bowl games the last several years, so they actually had a mantra coming into this year to win the bowl game. Well, here it is, Chris Peterson's last game. But no Trey Adams, no Hunter Bryant, the tight end. Those are two key players that said, "Oh, we're going to skip for the NFL draft." Look, I don't think there's any question. Washington's been a very disappointing team this year, and Boise State maybe has even exceeded expectations with a 12-1 record with all that quarterback with the roulette situation there. But I don't know. I kind of get the feeling that with Chris Peterson's last game, Washington will find a way.
That's the difference maker for me. I think this is a very difficult game to evaluate because of the guys at Washington and Henderson's played well at quarterback since he's been taking the job there. But I think the Chris Peterson effect, and I got what coach was on his way out last year?
That was Urban Meyer.
No, Georgia Tech.
Oh, yes, when he got absolutely annihilated.
Was it Minnesota?
Yes, Georgia Tech in Minnesota.
Got destroyed.
I agree.
Destroyed. So you know what? I have a feeling that Washington's players like Chris Peterson a little more than Georgia Tech's players probably liked Paul Johnson. So I'm going with the coach effect here.
Eason is interesting. I was taking a look at some of the draft boards, and I'm not as high on Eason as a lot of other people are. He's being looked at as a second-round guy. And I was high. I thought I expected him to play well this year, but I just wasn't sure. And I think there were a lot of people that got a little bit overly excited about him this year because he really didn't do anything ultra special at Georgia. He was just a high prospect who just finally got his opportunity to play with a big-time program. He had a good season, but this was a disappointing Washington year. It wasn't a lot, and he could have played better. So I'm not. I think that's one component that I think might hurt him at a bigger game against a bigger opponent. But look, Weaver is going to be a first-round draft pick, the pass rusher for Boise State, and he might be one of the top pass rushers after Chase Young. That's a good football team. But I think Washington's just a lot more talented because they are. They're a Pac-12 top team the last several years. And I think they will cause problems with that quarterback situation. Henderson hasn't played the type of defense he's going to play in this football game.
Yeah, I agree. I think Washington's the better team. Boise, it's always difficult to don't show them enough respect this time of year. Who was it they crushed? Was it in the Vegas Bowl a couple years ago, Oregon, when right after Cristobal got the head coaching job there, and everyone thought with all the momentum, but I think Boise ran him off the field there. So that's a little dangerous, but I'm with you. I like Washington.
Yeah, and don't forget Boise State didn't play in a bowl game last year because it was canceled.
Yeah, they played in it. They didn't finish.
Yeah. All right, let's get to the night game, the late game, the New Orleans Bowl. App State, 16.5-point favorite over UAB, and this is one of those games, and we see them a lot in the bowl season. Even though I am happy with I usually hate 90% of the matchups in bowl season, but I will say I think they did a pretty good job this year, but this is one of the worst jobs that they could have ever came up with. How awful to put App State with one of the greatest seasons in the history of the program, and you don't even match them up against a conference champion.
Yeah, well, hence the spread of 18.5. Is that what it's still? That's what I saw.
16.5.
Okay, I looked earlier in the week. I had 18.5, and yeah, I like.
I'm not sure it's going to matter.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't. I mean, I'm a big Bill Clark fan. We both are.
Right. This team was still smoke and mirrors
yes.
this year. be.
And now they got to go and step up in competition. And
yeah, we talked about the Conference USA, the West, especially at the bottom, is bad, and give them credit, but they just
they got annihilated by FAU.
Yeah, so I think we're on the same page here with App State.
And even though they lose their coach, the players love this guy, Sean Clark. So they're going to want it. They're going to want to win this game for him.
Yeah, there'll be continuity. That shouldn't be an issue, the coaching transition.
Not at all. Okay, final two games. Monday, you've got the Gasparilla Bowl, and this is Marshall, another huge spread of 17.5. But Doc Holliday is the master of bowl games. He is 6-0 all-time in bowls. Marshall has won 12 of 13 bowl games, and they're a huge dog in this one. And we get it. It's Central Florida. But, look, I like Marshall's defense. This is going to be one of the better defenses that Central Florida will play all year. I think Marshall's – I think this is out of the two games we just talked about with heavy spreads, I'm definitely taking Marshall out of the two.
Yeah, I've got Marshall covering the high number 2. UCF's a better team there, but I'm with you. Marshall's been pretty good on defense this year, and, just agree. I think the number's a little bit too high.
And this is probably one of those irrelevant kind of trends, but the AAC, especially this year, the AAC is just 1-6 versus Conference USA teams all-time in bowl games. But since the AAC is that much better than the Conference USA this year, I just don't think that's going to be something that we're going to – but, hey, if Marshall beats them on Monday, then we better just go, wait a second. But I don't think that'll happen. But I agree with you, covering the spread. All right, finally, Byu and Hawaii, and this is the Hawaii Bowl. So Hawaii had a great season, losing in the championship game. BYU, an independent, had a nice season. Satake is 2-0 in bowls. BYU's a 2-point favorite.
I like Hawaii big.
Big? Really?
I don't know. It's just gut feeling. I think they played last time out. They lost 31-10 at Boise in the ice. Before that, they'd won 4 in a row and then lost to Fresno by 3. And then, they have been very good of late. I just think one of the, sure, it's a home game. I think BYU, not saying they're just happy to be there. They went under, a lot of ups and downs this year. Their coach, there's a lot of rumors about Satake. He gets retained. I don't know. Gut feeling, I like Hawaii in this one.
Yeah, and BYU had some nice wins this year. They had the win against Tennessee. They had the win against USC. That was when things were going really well for them. And then they had the injuries to the quarterback situation. That's the X factor there is Zach Wilson, because they're a much better team when he's under center. They kind of lost their way in the middle of the season. But, I mean, losing 13-3 against San Diego State to end the season, that wasn't pretty. So.
Yeah, no, just could be. Felt good about a lot of the picks, and I'm closing with a pick I feel good about too in Hawaii.
All right. So who's your top pick out of that grouping then? Who would you?
The top. Let me go through them real quick. I think San Diego State over Central Michigan, my pick I feel the best about, or SMU over Florida Atlantic.
And did you pick any upsets at all? Outright upsets in there?
Outright upsets.
Who was your?
Oh, this is embarrassing. I don't know if I did. Let's see.
Yeah, that's not good because bowl season always has upsets.
Hold on, give me a second.
I don't think you did.
No, I did not.
Well,
did
just
you?
Hawaii, but that's a 2-point spread.
Okay, yeah, Hawaii. They're an underdog. It's an upset. Hey, I'm counting.
But maybe Marshall. You never know.
Yep, I like them to cover. I just think UCF too much talent.
They do. But I think if I was going to take an upset to try to say, well, let's see if I can make some money this week, I'd go with Marshall in the money line.
Yeah, I like it.
I wouldn't think that would be too crazy of an idea. All right, so Mitch, we'll talk to you on Tuesday on Christmas Eve. Thanks a lot as always, and enjoy the football.
All right, sounds good.